Jonathan Fitzgerald Kennedy, the man who won the 1960s presidential election against Richard Nixon, who later became president, but that's a story for another time. President Kennedy was very active during his time of presidency. Now let's take a look at how he directly impacted the United States of America. Wait, sorry, not just with pictures. Let's dive deep into exactly what he did for the American people and how he did it. Through what's known as President Kennedy's New Frontier, he worked to improve the economy, education, healthcare, and civil rights. He also worked to galvanize the space program. When Kennedy became president, the nation was suffering from a lofty unemployment rate and a slow economy. Kennedy's initial solution was to propose tax credits, a provision that reduces taxable income to encourage business investments. He also increased military spending, which created new jobs, thus boosting the economy. President Kennedy later accepted the idea of deficit spending, advocated by economist John Maynard Keynes. Deficit spending is the government practice of borrowing money in order to spend more than is received from taxes. This worked for only a little, because in 1963, Kennedy called for dramatic tax cuts for middle-class Americans while increasing the tax burden on wealthier citizens to put more money in the pockets of more people. This helped to jumpstart the tremendous economic growth of the late 1960s, while also lessening the burden on those struggling with poverty. John F. Kennedy saw education as critical to maintaining the economic strength of the nation. One way he showed this was through the literacy training of unemployed workers as authorized under the Manpower Development and Training Act of 1962. Vocational training programs introduced under the Vocational Education Act of 1963 also allocated presidential funds to help students at risk of dropping out. Although improving healthcare was a goal of Kennedy's, he wasn't able to see it through during his time of presidency. In the spring of 1962, President Kennedy launched a bold effort to provide Medicare, or health care for the elderly. This failed. It wasn't until the summer of 1965 that President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Medicare and Medicaid Act. Kennedy tread lightly when it came to civil rights, so as to not anger the conservative white Southern members of Congress in his own party. So basically it went like, yo, low-key, those people should get some rights.
2 seconds later.
Okay, y'all, calm down. I was just feeling generous. In 1962, Kennedy established the President's Commission on the Status of Women, a panel that studied how poverty and discrimination affected women. One glaring problem they noticed was the differences in wages received by men and women for the same work they put in. The Equal Pay Act of 1963 was later introduced, which required equal wages for equal work in industries that engaged in commerce, or the buying and selling of goods. This law was a crucial step on the road to fair and equal employment practices. When it came to civil rights issues for African Americans and other minority groups of color, Kennedy remained largely passive. In early 1963, Kennedy introduced a civil rights bill that demanded persecution for voting rights violations and offered federal money to aid school desegregation. This bill would become the most far-reaching act of legislation supporting racial equality in American history. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched the satellite Sputnik 1 into space, calling into question American technological superiority. A year later, in 1958, Congress created NASA, or the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, but the Soviet space program still remained several steps ahead of the American program. By the 1960s, the US and the Soviet Union were locked in what's known as a space race. Space race is the term used to describe the competition between the Soviet Union and the United States to develop technology to successfully land on the moon. On July 20th of 1969, America effectively became the victor of the space race. I believe that John F. Kennedy was a fine president whose care and initiative is very admirable. I think he could have gotten a lot more done if he had more support and time, but unfortunately he was assassinated in Dallas, Texas on November 22nd, 1963 by Lee Harvey Oswald. But his great legacy still remains. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new.